CEO of Cloudera, and I understand that he just flew into Singapore this morning and flying out tonight. So we're really very honored to have you today with us.
Pleasure.
And Dave Gladhill, who heads TNO for DBS. Dave has been with DBS for I think close to 8 years. 8 years in Asia for 25. So veteran really in banking. And I wonder whether Tom, you want to sort of introduce yourself?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with David and with DBS. So I'm the CEO of Cloudera. Cloudera is an 8-year-old company based in California. We deliver what's called a modern data management analytic platform. This platform is being used broadly in financial services, and there's a few trends that why financial services are turning to new disruptive technologies for the modern bank. The first is banking is going digital, and it's very important as our transactions move more and more online and our relationships with financial institutions are online, but those financial institutions understand us. They don't get to see us in a branch all the time. So what they want to know is who we are, what our household looks like, where we work, to try to anticipate and proactively understand our financial needs. The other is there's increasing regulatory pressure from governments across the globe, whether it's to address anti-money laundering, make sure that we have good controls over risk, fraud-type use cases. And in a vastly connected world, there's so much more opportunity for risk to be introduced. And so our platform is becoming a key platform to address those risk concerns. We're very fortunate to work with DBS, a very forward-thinking financial organization here in Singapore, and working on some exciting use cases that we believe are very forward-leaning in how a modern bank will operate in the future. And so it's a great partnership that is very strategic for us.
Okay,
If
so
you want to sort of share what
sure.
DBS is
So
doing.
we agree, which is why we're here, why we're partnering with these guys, obviously. But let me give you my context a little bit about why this is so important for our company. So we really sort of pushed very hard on the data strategy for DBS maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and been increasing our velocity ever since. And we firmly believe if we make the shift from a traditional bank, which is very much transactional, relationship, manual driven, to being a digital technology company in the most part, and that's what we see ourselves becoming, then we need also to become what I would describe as like a data-driven organization. That's making decisions based off data, not off instinct and gut, but really kind of a lot more sort of hard facts and analytics. Especially as we're becoming more online, especially as our touch points are increasing, we just don't have the physical capacity to do all of that without using data and analytics and machine learning. So we were very keen to get on the front foot of this. One of the things we did a couple of years ago, which you may or may not be aware of, is did a joint venture with A-Star, where we have a lab and some of the top data scientists in the country working with us on sort of innovative solutions to kind of very broad questions that you may want to answer with data. We'll be getting to a couple of those later on. But as we got in that engagement, we very quickly realized that the traditional technologies that we'd use, the old-fashioned legacy technologies for looking at data, was simply not big enough, not scalable enough to deal with some very broad and deep questions that require much more information: social media information, graph information, map information, information on suppliers, merchants, just all sorts of things which DBS did not usually host and hold as a transaction company. And so we needed to look outside of the traditional to much more scalable platforms, looking at not, to give it some context, when you look at transactions, ATM transactions, payments, things like that, we think in millions of records maybe. As you start to look at some of the big data questions that we were asking ourselves, you very quickly go from millions to billions, and that just doesn't work on the old-fashioned ways of doing things. So that's the sort of scale out that we were looking for, which is actually where the Cloudera and and the Hadoop platforms come in. Hadoop started off as a sort of Google spin-off, and then a guy called Doug Cutting took it and created a whole project and framework around it. It gives us the much better ability to scale and a much better ability to experiment with things that we could not even have started to imagine beforehand. So when we talk about using data to drive the enterprise, it's not just the latest offer to a customer that you probably hear about in the media, but how do you use it to understand, where is fraud happening in the company? How likely is it that a relationship manager is going to quit in the next 3 months, and can we predict that and go in early and start to figure out what sort of interventions we want to run? Where should the next ATM be placed? Where should the next branch be placed? How can we shift behavior of customers away from cash onto other products? Is there a way, if you're in the audit department, to go figure out what's the next audit that I should do? How are our customers feeling? Is there a sort of emotional score we can drive from our customers? All those sort of questions can start to become possible. And, for the last few years, we've been trying to get our organization and people's heads around that. The data is not just about the latest offer, it's about driving the enterprise with smart decisions based on data which we, 3 years ago, weren't even thinking about trying to capture and analyze. So it's very exciting. The platform and this whole Hadoop infrastructure is really, really exciting to us. So it's a pleasure to partner with Cloudera and with the research bodies and sort of taking our company on a completely different course.
Yeah, I was just actually thinking, I hadn't even thought of this, but when I was flying here from San Francisco to Singapore, I paid 5 or 6 bills online from my phone on an airplane. And if I wanted to, I could have deposited a check. And that's something we just didn't do 2-3 years ago. And so, but now you start thinking about my bank and the insight they can give to me about when I'm traveling, when I'm paying bills, where those bills are being paid to. We can build great profiles of our customers. And that's where I think DBS is on the forefront, really understanding that a bank is about data. And saying to be data-centric is kind of obvious when you think of that, as we get rid of hard currency and more happens digitally, that the asset that a bank has is it preserves digital wealth and data at the center.
Yeah, in fact, you think about us as a digital company. Already, 99.7% of our interactions are digital with our customers, and that's increasing at a rapid rate. It's kind of interesting the access of mobile devices and people shift to mobile is probably the biggest shift we've seen. And with that mobile device, people want to interact multiple times a day, in some cases with you, which gives us huge opportunity to interact in a different way and start to become a social friend of the customer through mobile devices, not just a place the customer comes when they want to check balance or have a transaction. So, vast opportunities there.
I was just sure, you talked earlier also about this platform that we bring called Apache Hadoop. It is very scale out. It can handle all these different types of data sets. It's very high performing, but most importantly, it's very agile in how you work with it. And so we could sit here and riff for the next half hour on coming up with use cases. And in the old world, with traditional tools, you would never tackle these use cases because they would take too long, they were too expensive. But with this new set of tools that are much more agile, you can actually iterate on use cases and not necessarily worrying about the ROI and building a big investment case because it's so quickly to try them out. And a lot of them are small little use cases, but if you do 5 or 6 of them, you could change a customer experience tremendously. And that's one of the other great things is the agility of this platform.
Do you mind walking us through a few use cases you mentioned with Cloudera specifically and DBS?
Well, you can walk through your use cases.
So let's think about something. So I'll give you a fraud one, first of all. So we want to try and figure out for trade, We fund a lot of trade, a big trade business. It's based on invoicing, ship movements, invoices, a whole bunch of different things. So, and it's highly prone to fraud. So the question we asked ourselves is, how can we start to look at other data outside of pure invoices and transactions to go and predict whether or not we might have a fraudulent activity. So you start to look at things like ship movements. You start to look at type of things like, well, if we know that typical goods movement from this port to this port, and we start to see anomalous goods movement, or we start to see timing which doesn't look like typical timing for that type of transaction, or we see behavioral shift in importers or exporters or warehousing or whatever else, you can start to create signals around things that might be potential fraudulent trade going on. Now, obviously, that's much more information than just the transaction and the data that we have. You have to really sort of cast your net very broadly. And ultimately, so this is, to start with, it's sort of a little bit hardwired, the decisioning process. But ultimately, we want to take that forward to sort of start looking at machine learning algorithms, which you can put on top of the infrastructure to go and learn patterns and learn anomalies in those patterns to warn us that there could be some odd behavior going on. I'll give you another use case, which is all of our financial risk data. We have massive amounts of financial risk information, and requirements on reg reporting and risk reporting are getting only ever more onerous. So we're actually moving all of the work that generates those financial and risk reporting data warehouses to the Cloudera platform, so we can get the scale that we need and the performance we need to turn those around much more quickly. We're looking at, for our digibank that we launched in India, that's starting to do a lot of kind of location analysis on customers and things like that, looking to try and figure out where we can predict awards, awards and marketing type offers. Again, we're using that platform to be able to run a whole lot of different scenarios, analysis, etc. So those are three kind of typical cases that we're applying to.
Yeah, we'll just share one of the exciting areas is machine learning. So whether you're looking at anti-money laundering, you're looking at fraud or cybersecurity, the way you find nefarious activity today is by identifying anomalies on your network. And it's very hard unless you have a machine learning capability that looks at all that traffic and sees patterns. And patterns are easy to discover. And once you discover the patterns, then the anomalies stand out. And so then you can have an analyst look at these anomalies, and that's how you detect any money laundering or fraud type use case, or even cybersecurity. And that's using this modern capability. You need lots and lots of data, and then you need this machine learning, which traditionally was very slow to perform, but now it's in a very high performing fashion.
Do you think that will ultimately become an advantage to the customer experience because it would be more seamless, I imagine? Like, just as an example, so I just moved from New York a few weeks ago. I was transferred here and I opened a bank account, and I was sitting in the office with my passport and everything at the physical branch, of course, and I had to sign a form 7 times. And she looked at it and she said, "Your signatures don't match." And she made me actually do it more times than I would like to admit, because I literally couldn't replicate the same signature. And then that was just the beginning. Then, when I tried to transfer money a few weeks later, I realized I don't know if it's for Singapore or with Citibank, I needed a physical device with me in order to transfer. And coming from the United States, I was flabbergasted with all the amounts of security that is involved with some fairly basic things.
Yeah. So absolutely. I mean, right now we apply the same kind of risk and controls to everybody for every transaction. We have to risk rate it, and what machine learning allows you to do is to get a much more fine-grained assessment of what that risk might be. So let's look for some behavioral characteristics. Let's look at your movements, your transactions over time, and give you a much finer risk rating as to whether or not we think you're likely to be trying to steal from us, or whether you're a genuine customer just trying to get business done. So yeah, and some initial studies we've done around that, think we can start to, our goal is invisible authentication. So that, right now, if you want to authenticate with us, you have to use a token device, or you have to use a password, or we have to ask you some, ridiculous questions if you call into the call center. We're trying to get rid of all that and say, can we go to completely invisible authentication? And can we use biometrics? Can we use machine learning data? Can we use behavior information to try and get to the point where we don't have to authenticate anymore? And frankly, authentication, you'll all have come to us and asked, what's your, mother's maiden name? Well, how hard is that to find, from Facebook? And, et cetera, et cetera. I won't go on, right? But actually, those questions start to become harder and harder to figure out the right questions to ask, and become less and less effective, right? So we see that there's a necessity as well to do that. In India, for example, I was just on this a little bit off subject, but we're using biometrics to identify customers. So rather than coming in and signing a load of forms, you can use now biometric authentication in India to set up a bank account. Now that's because the India infrastructure is actually quite advanced. They have this Aadhaar technology which links your ID card to a set of biometrics, and we can use that to validate your who you are. So now, when you want to sign up for a DBS account in India, we need a thumbprint. So how do we get that? Because we don't have many branches. So we've taken 500 coffee outlets, the Starbucks equivalent is called Cafe Coffee Day, given them all a thumb reader, and you can do what you described in India with your thumb while you're having a free cup of coffee with us. So that's a use of some data, but also, let me give you another example of customer experience. So how do you detect customer emotion? We'd love to do that. There are several ways of doing that. So, for example, when we call up the call center, we record that call. So it's not a very far step from taking that call, turning the call into text, using machine learning on our analytics platform to understand sentiment. Happy customer, sad customer, happy before, sad before, and almost have like a little emoticon of each customer derived from machine learning of conversations and interactions with us, to then be able to reach out when we see a problem, or to be able to maybe offer up or contact a customer when we see some level of unhappiness. So we think it totally changes the way we can service customers and get a sense of how they're feeling about doing business with us and interact in a different way. Yeah. Just a couple of examples there. It's actually, it's a lot of fun because there is no limit. And when you really start to open your eyes up to the kind of things this platform can do, we have just, crazy discussions about, what if we could do this and can you do that? And actually a big part of this whole data journey is, people say big data is not the problem. The platform, actually the technology is easy. The heart of it is opening up people's minds as to what's possible. And then getting enough analysts and people with good, strong data analytics capabilities to actually do the solutioning, which is why we've teamed up with A-Star, and we're taking in their data scientists, we're teaming up with universities, SMU has their learning lab, NUS has a data lab, and so we're finding a broader and broader pool of talent to start to come and help us answer these questions.
And well, I was just sharing, there's also the opportunity to introduce new products or services that you wouldn't have had before.
Mm.
So a common use case we explored in the US, each of us has a credit score, but it's one credit score. Yet, our obligation to pay for different things varies. So we'll find that there are young men that will never miss a car payment, but they may not make a home payment, because they just will not lose their car. But there are family men that will never miss a home payment, right? But may not make a car payment. In others that they like to dress, and so they will always pay for their, you know, their clothing. And so you can have different credit scores for different things you buy. And if you're a bank and you're offering credit, it's very important to know, rather than just one blanket credit score. And so you start building those profiles and you start understanding folks. The more you can know about a household, the more you can preemptively reach out to them, anticipating a financial need they have, and modeling that household. And when you have a relationship, you want that relationship to be a 10, 20, 30-year relationship. Could your bank anticipate that you're leaving New York and moving to Singapore? I think you said you were with Citi, right? Could they, you know?
Well, I was with Bank of America in US, so I had
Okay.
to join Citi here.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But if there was a way that Bank of America knew that you were leaving, right, and proactively reach out to you, and maybe seeing that you're, you know, putting in a down payment here or something, right?
Yeah.
What are ways to anticipate that?
Are there cultural, so, I mean, that just reminds me, like, so are there cultural, you know, you're talking about a lot of internal employees you have to get on board with new visions, but what about from a consumer standpoint, like even the biometric in India example, I imagine there's some countries, maybe even US, where people would be really, that would be very off-putting because of, you know, their fingerprint. So are there like cultural advancements and sort of perceptions you have to move along, you know, maybe at a slower pace before it can become sort of mass adoption?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you know, one we debate a lot internally. You know, what's great customer experience, and what's kind of spooky or freaky experience. There is a line, you know, some customers, you're right, would be very, very uncomfortable that we're using location data to tell them, you know, give them the next best offer. Some people would love that. And actually, we're finding more and more in the would love it camp. But yeah, we have to tread very carefully. You know, the key thing to that is experimentation. You know, if you look at the great technology companies, you know, the Googles, Apples, Netflix, Amazon, those guys, is they experiment relentlessly. They will have thousands of experiments running at any one period of time and test those questions, because we don't know the answer to those questions. You know, therefore, you know, when we look at those companies and say, okay, how do we experiment? Again, you need a platform that's great for experimentation, which is again why we need these sort of data lakes and these, you know, things like Spark environments, which allow you to test things out very quickly and try and see and test. That's the key to answering those questions. There's no right or wrong. There's no hard line. Some of it depends on demographics of, you know, how old's the customers? Are they married? Are they single? Are they, you know, there's lots and lots of different things that go into trying to get down to that answer for each of our customers. Yeah. Okay. But it's a, you know, interesting journey. Great question.
None of you are old enough to remember when ATMs were introduced. But when ATMs were first introduced, people said they would fail, right? No one trusted putting their money into a machine or interfacing with a machine. And it just took a while for, you know, just everyone to suddenly go, what would our lives be without ATMs now? And the same thing's happening in this world. So there's a fine line between convenience, security, and privacy. And that's the, you know, we have to always make sure that we're putting in place good privacy controls, and yet having convenience for all of us.
Yeah.
I mean, one thumbprint's a lot more convenient than 7 signatures.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. I'm sure there's also age criteria too. Like millennials typically don't really care about privacy. You know, they're okay giving up a lot of privacy for convenience, but you know, maybe an older you know, baby boomer or whatever might not. So I'm sure that's a factor as well.
Point at me.
No.
But a lot of these things we'll do as opt-in as well. So, you know, rather than assume people are comfortable, some of these things we'll opt in. But yeah, it's you know, internally we're starting to think about creating what are the rules of the road internally about what we as a bank feel comfortable doing with customers and information, not alone even the customer thinking that, right? So it starts to get you onto a completely different set of internal considerations about what's right and what's wrong.
Are there any other questions?
Question. The capabilities that you have described since I think has been well covered. I mean, they are very typical of big data capabilities. Then so why Cloudera? Did the platform enable you to do something that you couldn't do with other platforms? Or?
Yeah, so let me answer that in two different steps. First of all, why Hadoop first? Answer that question first, and why do we love that platform so much? And a couple of reasons. One is that it allows this scale at a radically different cost point than traditional, proprietary vendor technologies. And there's a massive active community of contributors to that open source platform, which makes us believe that it will win. And whether it's Hadoop or Spark on Hadoop or the whole combination, we see that as an ecosystem, not just a Hadoop platform
By
itself.
contributors, you mean data providers?
No. So these are people that help develop the platform. It's open source, people contribute to it. Many organizations are sharing into that whole Hadoop platform and evolving it. So all those companies I talked about, the Amazons, the Netflixes, whatever else, are contributing back into the platform so we can leverage off of that technology. Some of the optimizer models and machine learning were developed with the Netflix prize, and if you remember that a few years back where they put a prize to say it's $1 million for somebody who can uplift the Netflix recommender engine by a certain percentage points. Well, that developed this machine learning model, and that went into the Apache Spark framework, went into the Hadoop platform, and so now we can use Netflix algorithms for us, right? So it's just this vast and ever increasing and accelerating community around those platforms, which means that research institutes are using it, it's being taught at universities, etc. So the supply of people is just going to massively increase. So we think the platform and the ecosystem will win. So then what do? We can go and download Hadoop from the internet free of charge, but that's not a very smart thing for us to do because we have a big customer base. We want some stability of support. We want standard releases, all of those things, and that's where the platform providers like a Cloudera or whatever come in. Is take all of that great stuff and create it into something that we can consume as an enterprise without the thing blowing up next week. And there are a number of providers out there, but we saw that some of the philosophy of Cloudera, which we believe is one of the more open of the open source contributors and acceptors, was very attractive to us. So that's why Hadoop and why Cloudera. It's very interesting when you see the people coming out of college now. They have all grown up on open source and open platforms, etc. So yeah, and if you look at the whole ecosystem, virtually every one of the major sort of modern internet companies is full scale on that platform.
DBS is also working with IBM and Watson, right? Is there any interaction between the two?
They're very separate, to be honest. Obviously the underlying mechanics of Watson use some of that technology, but they're very different things. Watson is a sort of product that we can buy and consume, like a software as a service, if you like, platform, whereas this is more of a platform that we build something on the top of. So we see this as really the thing which is controlling our own destiny and allowing us to bring scientists to create products for DBS, if you like. A very different use case.
Any
I don't know if I answered that well from a Cloudera perspective.
No, it was perfect. I'm like, really went quiet. I'm like, that's great. No, I'll judge on that last one. So
Yeah.
our value to develop a security suite to protect the data across all these different components and make sure that it can't be breached. So that's how we kind of bring value. But then once this platform's here, David and his organization have the building blocks to continually introduce new use cases, new applications that they think of that give them a competitive advantage, right? And it's all about competing. And so it's having that platform that you continually iterate on that is very, very powerful. And that's where it's different than from a more pre-built application that you get from a vendor.
Actually, the last thing I would say on this whole platform question is that we firmly believe that cloud wins, not Cloudera cloud, but cloud more generic generally wins. And the more and more we can do on these type of platforms that are very cloud, portable, public, private cloud, the better. So we're really shifting as an organization full on towards all forms of cloud, be that private or public cloud or whatever else.
And we believe that. So when our company was started 8 years ago, the reason we're called Cloudera, we originally offered this Hadoop in the cloud. And 8 years ago, the cloud was, people weren't ready to accept the cloud. And so we've spent the last 6, 7 years making this great cloud technology fit into data centers. But now we're seeing the interest to go back to the cloud. I always say we're growing back into our name. When you start hearing financial institutions like David say, we're ready to adopt cloud technologies, that's an indicator of the future moving very quick.
How much does cybersecurity keep you up, each of you, like up at night? Because I covered a bunch of companies in Silicon Valley last year, and I would see they went, even a company like StubHub went from one guy, protecting their security to they now have mini war rooms, where they have 7 people constantly monitoring and things like that. And it's been a while since we've had a big, data breach or credit card breach or things like that. So do you think companies were just really kind of naive and not prepared, and now they're like kind of on par? Or do you still think it's going to be a growing part of the business, or each of your respective companies?
So I'll answer from us. I'm the CEO running a company that I have to protect. And we're fortunate that I'm not worried about someone stealing our intellectual property, because for the most part it's open source. They can already have it. So our ability is not so much protecting our business, but we need to protect our customers' business. And so what lands in our enterprise data, like here at DBS, is very, very sensitive data. And we're building the modern database in a connected world. The first generation of databases, so think of Oracle and DB2, the world was not connected. There was no internet when they were developed. And therefore, security was not a concern at that time. 15 years later, when the world got connected, those databases were attacked, and a whole cottage industry of companies formed to do authentication and authorization and auditing and encryption. Those were bolted on. Today, building a modern database, we're building an interconnected world. It's our job to natively secure this platform and to address all the privacy controls and all the regulatory requirements. So we do everything natively, and this new platform is actually more secure than technologies that have been around for 30 years because it's all integrated. And that's one of the things we take. We take data security very, very seriously. And then ironically, our platform is used, the most common horizontal use case across all verticals is cybersecurity intelligence. We're using machine learning, looking at network traffic to find anomalies, which tend to be nefarious actors on your network.
Yeah. So we have a big team, as you might expect, and it's the ever-present threat. Touch wood, there has been no sort of major breaches in Singapore recently, but it's a matter of time that something happens. I don't think anyone would claim that you can 100% protect against cybersecurity. So again, come back to the Cloudera, why Cloudera, if you go and get Hadoop from the internet, it's very, very insecure and everyone's got access to anything because that's the way it was built. And so this security thing which segregates who can access what's very important to us. But also there's opportunity. So we are, for example, using some of the Hadoop technologies to try and figure out where we might be under attack, where we may be seeing fraud, etc., etc. So with these sort of machine learning type algorithms, you can start to do this sort of sensing and cluster analysis and start to pick out signals. So we think that there's promise as well from leverages some of these things. But obviously it's a huge focus area for us all the time. Yeah.
Maybe a question more internal to DBS, because coming from a bank strategy background myself, we are always caught up with external analysis, competitive analysis, and then your internal teams will have to juggle with the numerous reports that are being requested all the time in terms of managerial accounting and all. So now you add this additional layer of big data. How do you organize your team so that they best make use of these new capabilities that
Yeah. That's a very interesting question. Yeah, we need to train basically a complete new breed of data science within the scientists within the organisation is what we have to do. And our strategy is being, we're not going to get everybody to be able to do the data science, but to understand it is very, very key and critical. And so rather than create a separate team of here are the guys who are going to do analytics and data science and separate it from the organization, we wanted to give it to everybody. And so that's what we did through this relationship with A-Star, for example. We signed up for this joint lab where I don't know if you know, A-Star have got a computer or technology section, about 600 scientists to look at computer technology, a lot of data scientists, etc. So we said, we'll create that free for the company. Anyone can use that, we're not going to charge you for it. So we created a capacity, and then we kind of created some excitement about what data could do. Our first really big project of like something internal was filling of ATMs, and that story's been well publicized, but basically which ATM do you get a Cisco driver to go to next to fill ATMs and stop them running out of cash? And we went from hundreds of cash outs a month to 0 or single digits now consistently. And that's all driven by data and analytics. We took people out of the equation, but then we got a great project. Well, if you can do it for ATMs, you can do it for everything, right? So now everybody is like wanting to get on the bandwagon of, maybe I can use it in my area. The next area that went after it was audit. How do I know which branch I should audit next that has potentially got the most risk? And they used just this broad thing. Let's look at medical leave, overtime, number of customers coming to the brands, 50 different types of data, and they proved that you could figure out which branch was next at risk, right? So audit, they're going, hey, that's pretty cool, right? And one up for audit department. And so you look around, and then the credit guys get on the bandwagon and say, well, hey, okay, we think we could do it for trade. And so you start to create this excitement in the firm and this sort of reward mechanism around more and more of the organization looking at data to solve problems. And now the way it works, we have a bidding process. So every 4 or 6 months, everybody comes with the CEO, myself, a few others in the room. Everybody comes with here's my idea for a big data project. Seriously, it's just like that. And we literally have a contest of who goes next for playing with these big data things. So we've really created, that's why I said the analyst is more important than the data. Data is actually the easy bit. That's a bit of an understatement, but but it's true. It's true, right? There's way more. We can throw way more technologies than we can smart ideas at this thing. And so this HR thing. Now, who would have thought HR were the biggest users of data and analytics? They love it. When they presented their predictive way of figuring out the next person's going to leave, they were just heroes in the room.
Hanging out on LinkedIn.
Yeah, no, probably but you know, hanging out on LinkedIn. How many customers did you call? Do you starting to arrive late? Are you taking MC days off? You know, all this different data. So we've added up the supply of here are all the people that can help you. Created a bit of a demand, created a buzz around it, and it's really starting to take off. So when I say we're a data-driven organization, it just doesn't mean there's a little pocket working on it. It really is going very broad into the organization. We think that's the right thing. You have to create this culture where people believe that the first question you ask is, do you analyze that? What's the data tell you? What's the, et cetera, et cetera. And that's so I agree, you know, a lot of the stuff that we talked about is everybody's got their data story. The key is getting the excitement in the organization that just fuels this thing.
One of the things we're working on is a technology provider. So David said, you know, kind of get the organization thinking more like data scientists, right? And get their mindsets there. The data scientist is a very sought after person. Right? It's like the highest paid career right now in technology. We're in the business of creating tools to make it easier to be a data scientist. And so we're working on data scientist workbenches. So you know, one great data scientist can share his or her algorithms with more junior ones and make this platform much more approachable. Take tools that people are used to. So they might have a BI tool like Tableau or Click that their business analysts work with all the time, and allow them to talk to Hadoop in the back end. So use an existing tool, but now going after bigger data sets. So we in the technology sector are trying to make the platform more accessible to more business people by automating a lot of the processes. At the same time, you're building excitement about the art of the possible.
I think we have time for maybe one last question. If anyone who wants to ask?
Are there any regulatory issues that DBS has faced? You're talking about a shift to cloud computing, and I know that the NAS is traditionally quite conservative on that front. So any issues faced so far? Or?
Yeah, I love that question so much. Yeah, I mean, actually we get a lot of people coming to us saying, oh, you know, let us help you talk to the regulators about cloud. So, well, you got to talk to me first. I'm going to be far harder to get past than the regulators. The NAS have never said don't use cloud. The only thing they've ever said is treat it like any other outsourced provider. That's all they've ever said. And they're coming up soon with some you know, policy clarifications. But yeah, they've never said no. I think what they're trying to do is clarify that position, because I think a lot of people thought no was no. And to be honest, in the earlier days of public cloud providers, the security was not great. And there were a lot of providers out there that if you'd got in with those providers, yeah, you could have got yourself into trouble. So I think they were highlighting to be cautious, but they weren't saying no. And now they're sort of clarifying those guidelines. So you know, we are already very heavily in the public cloud. You know, what people don't know is that every single, be careful as I say this, I'll say most, because I'm sure someone's going to find it. Most customer interactions come to us via the cloud, not to DBS directly. And the big cloud provider we use for that is a company called Akamai that basically do a lot of hosting and things like that. So pretty much every single customer interaction comes to us through the cloud today, full stop. So we're effectively in the cloud. But we're trading very cautiously, and it's not because we don't trust cloud providers, it's because you have to relearn how to do things. And that relearning and retraining of our people is just going to take time. So obviously we're treading you know, cautiously as we go. But you know, I'll take the Digibank, which we launched in India recently. All of the interaction data about how customer experiences goes to the Amazon cloud, and then we pump that back into DBS and use analytics platforms, including the Cloudera platform, to analyze it. So yeah, there are all sorts of things you have to be careful about. Where's the data residing? What country? You know, some regulators have country restrictions where that data could be held. But you know, we see the cloud providers maturing. We see the security maturing. we see it getting to a point where the security in cloud may be better than security in our own data centers, to be quite honest. Because they're so much bigger, they have so much more expertise they can apply to it, that ultimately that has to be true.
And when we read about breaches, they're always in private data centers, right? Rarely do we read about a breach in a cloud provider. And it's large part because they devote significantly more of their budget to securing their platform. And it's a single integrated platform versus our data centers are sprawled over 20 years and really different ways to get in.
Okay, on that note, thank you everyone for coming. I think great questions, great discussion. Yeah, so
Okay.
thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks for the question. Thank you. All right.